Hello, my name is Joan Gass, and I'll be moderating the closing keynote on the future of existential risks in academia. I'm the managing director of the Center for Effective Altruism, where one of my roles is to lead our groups team, including supporting university chapters like Stanford Effective Altruism. Today's closing keynote speakers will be the SERI faculty directors, Steve Luby and Paul Edwards. Professor Luby is professor of medicine and senior fellow at the Stanford Woods Institute and the Freeman Spogli Institute, and professor by courtesy of epidemiology and population health. Professor Edwards is the William J. Perry Fellow in International Security and Senior Research Scholar at the Center for International Security and Cooperation, as well as the Director of Science, Technology, and Society Program at Stanford. I'm really excited to have you two here today to hear about your first year running SERI, the role academia can play in these topic matters, and your thoughts on next steps for the academic existential risk community. So maybe just to kick it off, I'm wondering if you can tell us the short version of the story of SERI, how it got started, and what you're doing now.
Well, maybe I'll just start off by saying I got very interested, especially after the Trump election, in putting together a course for freshmen on existential risk. And I reached out to Paul, and he was super excited about doing it with me. And so we really worked to put this freshman class together. And that was a pretty big deal, actually, we thought, to stand up. And I thought at the end of it, well, the students said, well, what do you want to do next? And I thought, well, I want to revise it so we can teach it again next year, maybe with some improvements. But that's not what the students wanted. The students wanted to engage more. And they really were the ones that said, well, can we talk about what the next steps are? Like you started us down this road. What can we actually do to make a difference? So it was really in response to this student effort, the students' questions that had to say, well, maybe we don't just end with teaching the class. Maybe we go forward.
Yeah, and I like to tell a story of, I was just hired at Stanford when Steve had this idea, and he sent me an email and just said, would you like to teach a course on preventing human extinction? And I wrote him back 30 minutes later and said, yes, definitely. I had never met him. We didn't talk. I just said, that's what I want to do. So we've had, we're in our third round of teaching that class. It has been, if not the most popular, one of the most popular courses in that sequence for Frosh at Stanford. And right now we have, I think, about 110, 115 students in the class. So it's a thing that really touched a nerve amongst our undergrads. And I thought when Steve approached me about this, one of the things he said was that the great advantage of teaching Frosh is that they are still at a point in their lives when they can, they're figuring out where to go next and what to do. And this is a chance for us to steer them, not into particular careers, but into, something that people need to think about as part of their lives for everything they might possibly do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so it sounds like after the course, there was student demand, and then how did the initiative come about, and what's the breadth of work that you all are doing now?
Well, we started to have the conversations. I mean, the students clearly wanted to do more. And so we started to map out what that might look like. And, could there be student research projects? Could there be, what might we do? And then the students talked to folks at Open Philanthropy. And program officers at Open Philanthropy reached out to me and Paul to say, we hear you're teaching a course on human extinction. We'd like to talk to you and learn more about that. And so kind of putting two and two together, I thought, well, wait a minute, why don't we put forth to them what we might do over the course of the next year to actually instantiate some of what the students are asking for and see if we could get some support for building this out. And Claire Isabel at Open Philanthropy was open to the idea, and we just started having conversations back and forth. And then we would talk to the students, and then we talked to Open Philanthropy. And so we kind of came up with some programming that helped to structure our planning going forward. I mean, they were also thought partners in terms of thinking about what our comparative advantage was. So it was those were really helpful conversations.
Yeah, the first thing we did was with the students trying to figure out what to do next was to fund a summer research program. And we had, I think, 22 or 23 people who did that as a, full-time funded research for undergrads, which is kind of an unusual thing. The students organized everything, including the application review. We got a colossal flood of applications. I think we got 250 or so applications for the 22 or 23 slots we could fund. So we were able to get some really interesting and exciting research projects going, and we paired them with faculty mentors, but not just faculty. We also partly through the students' work on building connections, with people at the Future of Humanity Institute and at CSER and all the other existential risks outfits out there. So we made a lot of connections that way. And then, of course, the pandemic hit, and something that was interesting for the first summer became impossible to do any other way than online for the second round. And this year we've been doing some similar things. We've had some part-time research projects during the academic year, and once again we're going to fund full-time research projects in the summer.
That's exciting. It sounds like there was really kind of a collaborative effort, both with funders and students, to come up with what the Institute would look like in the space.
And we should call out Stanford's Effective Altruism Chapter 2, yes, because they stepped in and they were like, oh, we're really interested in this, and are there ways we can work together? And it was never a turf war or anything like that. It was, can we think about how to walk together on this? And because Stanford's Effective Altruism was connected with all kinds of actions and activities in other places, I think I think they both help connect us to national and international networks, and they also brought a lot of ideas about what we might be able to do.
How would you summarize the theory of change of the Institute as it stands now?
Well, I would say we think that existential risks are real and imminent, and we really need to address them. And we have an HR problem. That is, we don't have enough people who have the orientation and the skills to take on these very hard problems. So we're going to start in one place. We're going to start at Stanford, and we're going to teach people what are some key things to think about so that they can do this going forward. And and we're also working to build out a broader discussion on this, and we would like to see this also connect to employment. And ultimately, we would like other universities to say, oh, wait a minute, that looks pretty fun, and you're attracting students. Maybe we should be trying that too.
I'm curious in terms of how the conference fits in. This is the first conference you're having. I know you started with the research projects. Is that linking to a particular part of this theory?
What do you mean?
Oh, is the conference hoping not just to reach out to Stanford students, but maybe students at other campuses to help seed some ideas, inspire what initiatives like this could look like in other places, or at the very least make sure that some of the excellent momentum that's happening at Stanford can spread to places beyond individuals that are students at Stanford?
Well, I gotta say that the momentum for that has come mainly from our students who would like to take over the world, and we would be very happy to help them do that. I don't think they'll quite succeed at that, but they have been interested all along in making connections with other institutes and other students at other universities, and we've begun to get inquiries from people at other places, undergraduates. We've had there was somebody in the meeting today who is at the University of Chicago in his second year, and he has now applied to transfer to Stanford so he can take this, work in this group and be in the catastrophic risks and solutions concentration that I set up in the Science, Technology, and Society program for students coming who want to do a major that corresponds to this kind of thing. So, they really drove that, and they organized this whole thing. It's just been the most amazing experience for me and this is, I have to say, is Steve's leadership style has had a lot to do with this, because his approach is very relaxed, and he just sort of, sit around a table and say, what do you guys want to do? And then sit back and watch it happen. And we've also been very lucky with the particular people who have helped lead this group, that they've just been so invested and so smart and so full of resources and imagination.
And we do recognize that at a leading research university, that research also is important. We need to generate new knowledge to address these risks. And so in addition to undergraduates, we do want to grow our outreach to graduate students, and we do want to legitimize a serious conversation around these issues. So one of the advantages of the conference was bringing in really world-class people. And we had many Stanford faculty who also signed up. And we're positioned within the Center for International Security and Cooperation within CISAC. So legitimizing these discussions, and yeah, we do have some thoughts about and some efforts that we'll be making over the course of the next year or two to do more outreach to graduate students.
Yeah.
That sounds really exciting.
And that intersection between Center for International Security and Cooperation, which has historically been really interested in the problem of nuclear war, which is one of our focus areas, and also in biosecurity, which is another focus area for us. And then climate change, which really came into the center with me when I was appointed a few years ago. But that dovetails with a lot of work going on at Stanford in all kinds of ways, climate change work, and with the Science, Technology, and Society program that I lead. So it kind of had a natural coherence to it from the very beginning.
It sounds like there was, a unique positioning related to the existing structures at Stanford that you were able to take advantage of or partner with. I'm curious if that was one of the biggest lessons when you reflect on the last year, or if there are other lessons that you learned that you think has made the initiative successful so far.
Well, we're lucky enough to be in positions that are senior enough and at an institution that is flexible enough, at least it's part of it, that we're just able to do this without a lot of constraint. We have good support from administrative staff, don't have people saying, you should do it this way or that way. They just kind of let us run with it. And that's been a really, real blessing to make it happen like that. But I got to say, my experience at all the institutions I've worked in, and there are a few, has been that really, if faculty really want to do something, and they can find the money for it, then the great thing about universities is that they can usually do it. In this case, the students were able to find some money too, which was really helpful.
Yeah. That's really exciting. I can imagine some students coming to this conference and coming away being really excited to try and replicate something like this at their university. I hear one of the things that might be an indicator that it's, or like one thing that might be important early on is a faculty sponsor, ally, or kind of co-companion to kind of get that leverage within the university. Is there anything else that you would want to make sure, was in place if someone was interested in replicating something like this?
Well, it's interesting you raised that issue, Joan, about the faculty sponsorship, because I do think that the students talked a lot about that a student club, there are just some limits to what you can accomplish with a student club. And so, I mean, I'm a global health researcher, and so I'm really used to raising money to run projects. And so the notion of building this out as a project where we would also have professional staff and we would also be able to pay for professional conference organizers, for example, those kinds of things that that you can do with some funding, with some planning, that might not be natural for students that just run a student club and pass it on from one to the other. So we are going to have the challenge that I think all groups are that are funded by, that are led by really charismatic, dynamic people, of how do we transition and bring young people in? And, you know, so those are somewhat challenges on the horizon. But I do think it's the, I think the fact that where Paul and I sit are really helpful. I think it's really helpful that there are two of us and that we have different backgrounds, and so tend to look at things a little differently and in a complementary and constructive way. I think all that helps, but I also think it was really our willingness to listen to the students and follow their lead.
Yeah. I will tell you, one of the issues that they have faced, we have faced, is that they would really like to have more coursework that directly addresses existential risks, and that has been a bit of a problem. And I think part of the reason is that even faculty are a little bit worried about characterizing things as being as bad as they actually are. So, my climate talk today, this is such a simple and obvious point, but we have known about the climate change problem for 40 years, and it has been briefed to policymakers over and over and over again, and every year the carbon dioxide concentration goes up. It has never gone down except for a brief time during the early part of the pandemic. So, they want courses that are going to talk, give them straight talk about this. And part of what happens with faculty is that they get siloed or narrowed into particular aspects of these problems, or some piece of a solution. And there's a lot to do, so it's not really a criticism, but we'd like to see more faculty kind of stand up and say, look, these are serious issues that could end our civilization as we know it, and we have to face them. So, finding faculty to take that kind of position and teach from that stance has been an issue.
Yeah, and in terms of incentives for faculty, I imagine for some folks there are publication incentives. For some folks, perhaps if there's a bunch of demand from students for a particular course, that could be a platform that they could use to offer it. Can you talk a little bit about what would incentivize someone in the faculty space who's interested in some of these issues, or what would be helpful if they wanted to advocate for more focus on this area, or to minimize risks reputationally or things like that?
Well, this is going to be different at different universities. One of the things we're doing with the very generous open philanthropy funding is using it to offer teaching assistantships to faculty who want to teach courses, because often the overhead, as Steve said earlier, the faculty resource that's hard to find is time. And so if you're going to teach a new class and you're going to build it up from zero, having somebody who can support you in the grading and the kind of legwork of setting up a class online and all, building a syllabus and all that is really invaluable, and it's not that expensive relative to faculty time. So that's one way. Other universities, universities that don't have that kind of research structure with the research faculty and then teaching assistants to help them in courses, that'll be more challenging perhaps. But I'd say finding funding to help design a class, to get somebody to research the area with you and help you find the right kind of literature to read and use. That's another way you can help people.
I think another potential incentive is for faculty to recognize and department chairs to recognize that students are interested in this material, and that if you frame your, and if you frame the work within your remit that's connected to these big issues, you'll actually attract students. So when Paul and I started doing this, when we proposed this to Thinking Matters, they said, well, it's kind of extreme, but all right. They said, now, neither of you have experience teaching these kinds of classes, so we're going to limit you to 40 students. So I thought, okay, 40 students, that will get us started. And, then, wait a minute, we did some preliminary signups and we need to open this to 60. Are you willing to do 60? And we said, 40, 60, all right. And then it was 80. And then by the time the first class was there, we were at standing room only in a classroom that's designed to hold 90 some students. So I think that that as various groups, as departments within schools have a requirement to teach and are rewarded for the number of students they teach, one of the things this taught me is that this generation is really interested in this material. And so I think that can be an incentive to have eager students in the classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. I was struck by the anecdote that you said earlier about a student transferring to Stanford and the kind of like value proposition of that. And I wonder if there's potentially similar things you could see at the graduate school level as you expand there, where people are, you're able to attract, PhDs, and graduate studentships are quite competitive and trying to figure out, value proposition of being able to pursue research in this area or have a community of individuals do that might actually become a distinguishing feature for the university. Shifting just a little bit, because I know we only have a couple minutes. You've talked a bunch about students being involved, and I'm curious how the relationship between you all as individuals of the faculty and students has evolved over time, and if as the institute is growing, how you're looking to kind of like formalize some of those roles a bit. If you started out as volunteers and now have more formal positions.
Yeah, I'm afraid that if we paid the students what they were worth, we'd be broke. I don't think our SERI team has slept more than 3 hours a night per person for the last 2 weeks. I mean, they've just been so this, and it's great. It's really I am inspired by their commitment, but we do need to transition to a strategy that doesn't require people to be heroes in order to advance this agenda. So that the students aren't just volunteers, that we can pay some for their time, or that they can earn course credit, and so that this can help them going through. But I think that's all doable.
Yeah, we have, we did hire Kuhan, who was a senior when this all became a senior while this was all happening, and then graduated. So he is now, we have a paid position for him as a lead organizer, and he's been super, super important in this whole thing. But others are working as volunteers, and I don't know how we'll end up settling all that out. There are administrative restrictions on paying students for different kinds of roles, so we have to sort that out a bit more. But what we're hoping is that as they kind of pass through the program and move on into other parts of their career, that they'll bring younger students behind them into the roles that they're occupying now, and we can continue with it that way. And if anybody who's worked with these people has seen amazing role models. So
yeah, that's really exciting. As you think about some of the energy that's being kind of captured now, I'm curious if you have a vision for what you hope has happened, looking back, if you were 3-5 years from now, looking back, what you hope you all been able to achieve, what you think the future holds.
Well, I would just like to see the people who have passed through this program moving on into all kinds of careers, but with some part of that career focused on one of these areas or others. And so they make it part of their lives. It's kind of, part of the 80,000 hour philosophy of EA. Where, that's a good way to think about what your life is about. And I think this is that people can have all kinds of careers that make a difference and still affect the outcomes of these really major problems we face.
Well, I want to make sure that we have time for you all to say a couple closing remarks. So I just want to say it's been a really big pleasure to talk to each of you and hear about the evolution of SERI and just have really enjoyed the conference. So really appreciate all the work that you all have done. And I would love to hand it to you two for some closing remarks now.
Thanks, Joan.
Thanks, Joan. Well, maybe I'll just start by we have many people to thank. And I want to begin by thanking our funders who not only have provided financial support, but have also helped us think through about what our comparative advantage is and how to walk forward. So a big shout out to Open Philanthropy and also support from the Survival and Flourishing Fund, the Berkeley Existential Risk Initiative, and Stanford's own Ethics, Society, and Technology Hub. I also want to thank all of those moderators, Joan, and everyone else who agreed to moderate, and all the speakers from all over who were willing to prepare and come in over the weekend to participate in this. Very grateful for that contribution. Paul?
Yeah, so we also had an enormous and really great conference organizing team we want to thank. The SERI team was led by Kuhan Jayaprakasan and Mauricio Baker, but with contributions from Michael Pyun, Vinjay Vale, Amy Dunphy, Emma Williamson, Laura Bosek, Oliver Zhang, and Sydney Von Arx. We also had some non-SERI organizers, Rebecca Barron and Sawyer Bernath, and of course the great London Filmed team that's responsible for this whole platform and leading all of us through the process of presenting. They did graphics, they did tech, they did audio, they were up really late in London. And eventually some of these talks today will make it to YouTube, where they'll be available to everyone who wants to watch them. I want to give a special shout out to Abby Sumandal, part of that team, who has worked tirelessly with SERI around the clock for the last month to put this event together. We would not have been able to do this without you, and thank you so much. So, other things to talk about as we go forward from this conference is that this community is growing, and we're the existential risk community, and we're thrilled to have all of you out there be a part of it. So all the dedicated, thoughtful, caring people who are committing themselves to mitigating existential risks with their careers inspire us. And we encourage you to make use of the Swap Cards feature for meeting other attendees. There are lots of other organizations, collaborators, funders in this space, and that's a great way to meet them. So back to you, Steve.
Yeah, and I would hope that for those of you who are attending, who are early in career, who are still students, I would think that you would be inspired by the diversity of people who spoke to you, with the diversity of background and the various things that they were doing. So, as you look at what people were presenting, you can see for yourself some areas that might fit with your aptitudes, that might fit with your interests, and really would follow on the advice of some of the other speakers about getting some experience, reading, thinking, learning, places you can volunteer to work to have an impact. And I would also say, if there are still some faculty members out there listening, that we have really found, I mean, I'll speak for myself and I'll let Paul speak for himself, but I will say that this has been really profoundly inspiring to think about what we as faculty can do at this moment in time is to engage in a conversation with students and to empower them to think about how folks working together have made progress on really important problems in the past and the things that they might be able to do. And it has just been super transformatively exciting in terms of what we're able to do coming into work, or actually we just come into Zoom now, but it's still cyberspace sort of work. So we really hope then that lessons from this conference are really stepping stones for you to continue to advance this work going forward.
Yeah, and we do hope that this conference is going to happen again, and we want to make it even better. So we have a quick feedback form for you to fill out, and you can find that by going to tinyurl.com/SERC21survey. SERC21 survey, tinyurl.com. It's just a short survey, but it'll help us, especially if you have there are some free-form questions there, anything that you want to say about the conference to help us improve it on the way forward. And we're about to have a post-conference after party and celebration on GatherTown. So I think we'll close there, and thank you all for attending and making this a great success, and we look forward to seeing you next year, if not sooner.